The pandemic challenged our assumptions about work and led to the question, what is an office? As corners of bedrooms and ends of kitchen tables became makeshift workspaces, necessity was the mother of invention, and technology helped plug the gaps. But when the pandemic ended, something curious happened, as for many, working from home stuck. And now, another assumption is being challenged, with a new question being asked.
What is a weekend?
Nearly. Could we work a 4-day week? In November 2024, a new trial of a 4-day week began in the UK. 17 businesses encompassing 1,000 workers will get extra time off with no loss of pay, and the results of the trial will be presented to the government next summer. The experiment is being run by the 4-Day Week campaign, a non-profit organisation which argues that the 9-to-5 5-day working week is outdated and, as their name suggests, campaigns for it to be reduced to 4. They argue that a 4-day week would give people a better work-life balance, which would translate into happier, less stressed employees who would perform better and take fewer sick days, so much so that employers wouldn't even miss the extra day's work. While for the tourism and leisure industry, the resultant 3-day weekend would boost profits. Critics, however, argue that a 4-day week is simply rewarding part-time work with full-time pay, that it will increase costs for businesses, if they need to hire additional staff, for example, and that compressing people's workload could in fact cause them more stress. Well, maybe that's what they used to say when a 6-day week became 5, because as it turns out, the weekend as we know it is a fairly recent invention. Back in the 19th century, most people in Britain and America worked a 6-day week. Sunday, thanks to God and the unique way in which He created the world, was the single day of rest, where people were expected to go to church. But many used Sunday to go out drinking, leaving them far too hungover to work on Monday, and so they often just didn't turn up. Over time, the concept of a cheeky Monday off became such a tradition that it was known as keeping St. Monday. The growing leisure industry embraced this trend. Horse races, music halls, theatres, they all drew crowds, while museums and gardens flourished. For many, Mondays became the day of the week to look forward to. Perhaps surprisingly, this system was a success. Workers were happy to make up the shortfall just by working harder on the other 5 days. The buyers of their products were happy because they were still receiving weekly deliveries. And families were happy because they got more leisure time. But then, the Industrial Revolution and the growth of factories clashed with St. Monday. Steam-powered machines required disciplined workers who arrived on time, even on Mondays. You couldn't work harder on the other 5 days, you had to feed the machinery regularly for all 6. This rigid schedule left workers unhappy. While the threat of unemployment brought some back in line, this tradition of St. Monday still lingered into the 1880s. But behind the scenes, there was a solution quietly taking shape. In 1842, the Early Closing Association began lobbying for free Saturday afternoons in exchange for full Monday workdays. They targeted key towns and employers and gradually spread the idea of a 5.5-day week. Meanwhile, the church, ever optimistic, believed that a half-day Saturday would lead to greater church attendance on Sunday, while the leisure industry soon took advantage. Cut-rate train trips, theatre shows, and Saturday afternoon also became home to a new craze: football.
In the second half, Bolton take their chances. It's a goal!
It was not uniform, it was not swift, but over the course of 50 years, the half-day Saturday was adopted. So just half a day to go. In 1908, a mill in New England, USA, permitted a 2-day weekend so that its Jewish staff could observe the Sabbath. This was very popular and led other industries nearby to also introduce the 5-day week. Then Henry Ford laid down a 40-hour working week at his factories, meaning Saturday and Sunday off. This was part altruism and part business. He reasoned that the more leisure time people had, the more time they'd have to enjoy his cars. And in 1932, to counter the unemployment caused by the Great Depression, the 5-day week was officially adopted throughout America. Meanwhile in Britain, chairman of Boots the chemist, John Boot, tackled overproduction at his Nottingham factory by granting workers Saturdays off with full pay. He also found his workers far readier and more invigorated on a Monday. The experiment was the subject of an inquiry led by Sir Richard Redmayne, great-grandfather of Eddie Redmayne, which recorded its positive effects and noted that others may well copy the 5-day week, which they did, and it thus became the norm in Britain. The point of all this history is merely to demonstrate that what we call the 5-day week and what we call the weekend are mere constructs, figments of the imagination, nothing but habit. So with the 6-day week invented by God and the 5-day week by a few factory owners, what about the 4-day week? There are two main arguments in favour of a 4-day week. The first is that new technology makes people more productive, enabling them to work less to produce the same outcome. This is not a new idea. Back in 1930, economist John Maynard Keynes estimated that in just a couple of generations, technological change would make a 15-hour week possible. In 1956, Richard Nixon, then Vice President, promised Americans that they'd only be working 4 days in the not-too-distant future. And weren't computers meant to grant us loads of leisure time? Well, they didn't, because the gains went to productivity, not to workers' leisure. But this time round, things might be different, due to the increased adoption of artificial intelligence. This year, Tech.co surveyed over 1,000 businesses and found that companies with a 4-day week policy were 3 times more likely to be using AI extensively compared to those with 5-day weeks. While 93% of companies leveraging AI are considering implementing shorter work weeks. And with more and more companies testing the approach, Forbes magazine argues that it's only a matter of time before it becomes widespread. In fact, one hedge fund manager is investing in golf courses because he anticipates such a big increase in leisure time, thanks to AI. The second argument is that many people can actually do their jobs in 4 days. The extra day off would see them motivated to work harder for the other days, and their work-life balance will be improved, actually enhancing productivity. Microsoft Japan saw employee productivity soar 40% after trialling a 4-day work week in 2019, while enjoying additional benefits such as lower electricity costs. So, returning to the question posed by the late Dame Maggie Smith, what is a weekend? Well, in Britain, the answer to that could soon change. In January 2023, South Cambridgeshire District Council began a trial of a 4-day week for 450 desk staff. Employees are expected to deliver 100% of their work in 80% of their time, but they'd also get 100% of their pay. After the initial 3 months proved promising, the trial was extended to a whole year, with refuse collectors also taking part. And the results were staggering. Regular household planning applications were decided about a week and a half earlier. Around 15% more major planning decisions were completed within the correct timescale, and the time taken to process changes to council tax benefit claims fell. Staff turnover also dropped by 39%, helping save £371,000, mostly on agency staff costs, as the 4-day week made permanent recruitment easier. But despite the clear success of the trial, the then Conservative government was less than supportive, arguing that the removal of up to 1/5 of the capacity of the authority means that it is unlikely, in aggregate, for it to be able to support continuous improvement. The result was that the council had to submit around 200 pieces of raw data to the government every single week in an effort to continually prove its efficacy, to which it received no reply, but that's another story. The Labour government, however, has not opposed the council, paving the way for other councils to adopt a 4-day week if they so wish. In fact, since Labour came to power in July, there has been growing discussion about whether they will promote a 4-day week. So far, while their Employment Rights Bill introduced to Parliament on 10th of October strengthens worker rights around flexible working, it stops short of calling for a 4-day week. But the fact is, maybe it won't need to. If a 4-day week proves to be the most efficient and productive way to operate a business, then it will soon become adopted. After all, that's what happened last time.